when people start at a car company like that, what are they really working on?
Usually they're working on velocity packages and...
Yeah, they call it hubcap duty.
Yeah.
And you got to work on a Viper.
I got to. It was the advanced studio, so I was very lucky. We had the advanced studio and the international studio, because at the time we also were doing Lamborghinis.
Now, hold on a minute. You worked on some Lamborghini stuff too?
I did when I was at Chrysler, yeah.
What Lamborghinis?
We did, I'm trying to remember what it was going to be called. It was, I guess it was the Diablo. So we did a proposal. I did a proposal that really looked a lot like the Countach, a modern version of that. And funny story, I found out later on that apparently the design was really well liked by the Chrysler executives, but they had a contract with, I want to say, not Gandini. Who was the big guy designing cars at the time?
Pininfarina.
No, it was an individual. I guess he did the Diablo. He ended up doing the Diablo. Like from a political standpoint, that was going to be the design they picked. So when they did the big dome, display, so I did a full-size model, full-size clay. They painted it, and because of the politics involved, and they were afraid they were going to pick it, and then the upper management wanted the one from the Italian guy, they didn't show my car at the presentation.
From Inside the MotoMan Studio, these are extraordinary stories of ordinary folks and how they became the people shaping the car world, the tech world, and our future. Riddle me this, what is the hardest job in the car world? Now, I'm willing to bet most of you would guess chassis control engineer, the guy that has to deal with reliability at the likes of Range Rover, or even the poor schleb that has to deal with health and safety at governments all around the world. But very few of you would guess car designer. Now, I'm not here to suggest that all car designers have the hardest job in the world. It's not easy, but the ones that are tasked with redesigning iconic cars, cars like the 911, the Corvette, or perhaps even a bit more downmarket, the Mazda Miata, they take a certain risk, because if they get it wrong, there's a mob of all these car owners that will come and murder them. Now, today's guest, you've met him before, Ken Saward. He is the North American Design Director for Mazda. He has designed not one, but 3 iconic cars in his career at Mazda, 3 Miatas. But that wasn't it. Turns out he's designed 2 other iconic cars at completely different car companies, and on top of all of that, he's achieved incredible success in a totally different genre of the car world.
Growing up, my dad was into cars. My older brother was into cars. My bedroom walls, I shared a bedroom with 2 brothers. My older brother had dragster pictures on the wall and Sox and Martin drag cars. And
that's
so I was
hardcore.
I was exposed to cars at a very young age. We were close to Limerock Park up in Connecticut, and I just got into drawing cars. I just loved the way cars looked. There was something emotional about them. Played with Hot Wheels when I was little and AFX cars, and something about cars. I love just looking at them and the shapes of them.
Now let's clarify. So when you say dad's into cars, what does that mean? You go to the car dealerships with him every September, or you went to a racetrack and he raced a car?
No, he didn't race. Neither my brother nor my dad raced, but they were very into cars. My dad had a '62 Coupe de Ville. He was very into Europe.
Giving me crap about private school, and you have a Coupe de Ville.
It was used. It wasn't a new car. He liked cars, and he loved, we had Hemmings Motor News laying around, and he was into looking at old cars. And growing up, my dad and my uncle, when they got back from the war, they bought a Duesenberg, a Murphy body. He would drive with a big cigar, and my mom was embarrassed because it was such a big car, and she thought everybody was looking at him. So eventually, him and my uncle sold it, and I think over time, my dad always looked at Hemmings to see what the price of a Duesenberg Murphy body was going for. And we used to go to New Hope for the car show, and that was always a thing for him. It's whenever he saw the prices where Duesenbergs were going.
I would be interested to find out what he paid for that car, because I don't know what.
Yeah, I don't know what they cost. I mean, it probably wasn't a lot right after the war. It was a big car. Everybody was the big 3 were starting to do all new cars, late 40s. My dad had 8 brothers and 1 sister, and my grandfather worked for the city of New York. So he was pretty well off. He was in the city planning group or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So they were pretty comfortable. They weren't impacted by the Depression or anything like that. And I have a picture of all my uncles sitting on the front of a Duesenberg. So maybe that had something to do with it, that my uncle and my dad, they grew up with that car. Kind of a lot of us do that. We get cars we grew up with. And so I think maybe that was the draw for them, was that like, well, they wanted a car like they had when they were kids. And so they couldn't afford it on their own, so they went in halves on it.
Now, at the risk of embarrassing you here, because you look unusually young for your age.
That's what I'm told, yeah.
Yes. When were you born?
I was born in 60.
Okay, so this is kind of after like the whole hot rod era kind of
after the big
launched in the 50s.
The push of the 50s and the prosperity of the country and everything. But we lived very comfortable growing up in Queens, and I think Hot Wheels were getting big at the time, and they were just coming out, and I was just, that might have been it. I mean, now that I talk about it, that could have been it. Just having Matchbox cars and Hot Wheels.
I feel like you're your first therapist.
There you go. What brought this on? And then I just loved cars from that point on, and I started drawing them, and I would draw them in grade school, and I remember guys would give me lunch money if I could draw like their brother's GTO or something, and so I would sketch cars. And I'll never forget, my dad once said to me, he goes, you really need to draw things other than cars. And I'm like, but I love cars. I just want to draw cars. So
let's not drive past this. Your friends would pay you.
Yeah.
To draw
We're
cars.
talking 25 cents for
but still, like I drew cars. No one paid me.
Yeah. I mean, candidly, I was pretty good at it at an early age, and so I had a good,
this?
Probably like, this was probably middle school. So
okay, so you were in the early 70s.
Yeah, it was probably early 70s. But I think that was it. I was very dialed in on what cars look like. So if some guy said, "Hey, can you draw my brother's GTO?" I knew what a GTO looked like, and so I could draw it for him.
Was there anybody around you, dad, mom, uncles, that sat you down and said, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. Maybe you should go to an art school, or maybe you should consider doing this for work"?
No, as I said, my dad thought I should draw other things, and I'm like, no, this is what I want to do. I was very lucky. I think from that age, I just naively thought I want to be a car designer. I want to design cars when I grow up. And
you knew this as a job. You knew it existed.
Probably maybe since I was 10 years old. That's all I wanted to do was design cars.
And how did you learn that there was a job like this?
Well, I read magazines. I would get Road and Track, and there'd be stories in there, and there'd be artists who did, sketches of new cars coming out. So, I assume there's guys that do this because all these cars are beautifully designed. And so I thought, well, I'd like to do that. And at that age, I wasn't thinking like I got to live in Detroit to do that. I just was like, had this dream of designing cars one day. So that was kind of the impetus for me, was like, there is a job out there that I could do this. And, I didn't envision going forward and where my career would take me, but I just thought, it'd be cool to design cars.
Most of the folks you and I know, including our mutual friend Derek, this was not the case.
Yeah.
They did not know there was a job like this. Like in the case of Derek, and he was the former director of Mazda design here in North America. It was his, I believe, his shop teacher or the guy he was working in a place forming like fiberglass. It was fiberglass on like jet skis or something like that. And that guy said, you realize that A, you should be sketching this stuff for a living, and B, there's a school in Pasadena that you can go to. So you are unique in that you knew A, the career existed, and B, this was a path you wanted to get on.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky in the sense that that's what I ended up doing. But yeah, I didn't have ambitions to be an astronaut or a pilot or I wanted to design cars. No, I'm not a big fan of planes.
Did you want to race cars?
Yeah. I mean, obviously racing cars were a big part of what I found attractive about cars. Chaparrals and Daytona coupes and things like that. Those to me were cars as a kid. I remember looking at it and just thinking, these are just so cool looking. C2 Corvettes and things like these were cars that like, that's just such a cool looking car. So, and then racing cars, obviously racing was big in the 60s with the big three. And so I got kind of sucked into the whole racing thing because they were the coolest looking cars. Big wheels, wide tires, the whole thing.
Okay, so you realize this brings up a huge part of our discussion. And I actually do not know the answer to this, and I've known you for, 8 years now? 10 years?
Yeah, probably 10 years.
What was your first car?
An Opel Manta.
It's actually not a bad choice.
No, it was we convinced my dad. My older brother had a Manta. Well, he originally had a 74 Camaro LT. And that was a cool car, and we painted the inside of the wheels black, and it was white. It was just a bitchin' looking car. But no, so then we needed a car, and so my middle brother, who doesn't care anything about cars, kind of anti-car guy in a sense. My dad, my brother, and I, we went in on a car. I think if I recall, my dad paid most of it. And we found a Manta Rally, with the black hood.
Oh, yeah.
And that was, to me, that was a cool enough looking car, first car, that's good. My dad liked it because it was European. My brother couldn't care less. So we bought a Manta, and that was my first car.
So was there a discussion? Like, did anybody sit you down and say, okay, this is how we're going to deal with college, and this is how you balance a checkbook, and this is what you do if a girl dumps you? Or was it just,
No, I think like any of us, you learn as you go through life. I didn't learn how to balance a checkbook since probably when I started Art Center.
Okay.
I realized that, you couldn't have a different date on the check than when you handed it to the guy. It really didn't matter. If you gave him the check, he'd deposit it. I thought, well, if I post-date it, he can't deposit it for 2 weeks. That wasn't the case. But no, nobody
was
really.
Art Center crazy expensive back then too?
It was expensive for the time. Yeah.
But crazy. Art Center is super expensive.
No, I wouldn't say crazy, but it was still more expensive than, say, UCLA or USC.
What was the line from community college in Queens to Art Center?
Well, it's interesting because when I was in community college, I applied to Pratt because I wanted to stay in New York and I wanted to design cars. And I'd read something where Pratt had an industrial design program, and I thought, okay, I was kind of just thinking I would do that. And I applied to Pratt, and unfortunately, my grade, this is probably before I started community college, my grades in high school weren't very good. Hence, I was sitting there drawing cars and not studying. And so I didn't get into Pratt, I think mainly because of my grades. So that was a blessing in disguise because if I had gotten into Pratt, I would have never gone to Art Center. So I went to community college to raise my grades. I took mechanical technology, so I learned architecture and technology and engineering drawing and everything. And then I applied to Art Center. And I applied to Art Center. I was 23 when I applied to Art Center.
And not CCS?
No, I didn't really know about CCS at the time. I really was pretty focused. I'd read some articles in Road and Track about this school in Pasadena and Strother McMinn and all of these people who went to Art Center and how the whole industry is basically comprised of people who graduated Art Center. So that was my only thought.
As you know, I'm a big whole no debt guy.
Yeah.
And if I hear a student or parents talking about taking debt, I'm like, you know what? Maybe you should go to community college locally, pay it in cash, get your grades up, and try to get as much money
out of the school
scholarships.
Grants or something. Yeah.
So that's 2 years and 2 years ideally. What was it for Art Center?
It was 2 years at community college and 4 years at Art Center. Although Art Center is set up where you could actually get out of there in 3. Because it was a trimester system, so you could do 3 semesters, so to speak, in a year. So you could get out of there in 2.5 years.
But you were doing internships at that point,
Correct,
too.
Yeah.
And so what was the first internship?
So I did an internship at this neon light company, nothing romantic, down in L.A.
Yeah.
Just doing neon light design. And then I applied for an internship at Renault. So I went to Paris and worked at Renault for 3 months.
Okay. I'm angry.
Yeah.
You have had a charmed life. I've known you for 10 years. I didn't know about the Cadillac.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the Opel. And I think I did know about the Renault part. But you put it all together.
I think I probably told you about that.
You have had a super charmed life.
I've been pretty lucky, yeah.
Especially for a kid from Queens.
Yeah.
So what are you living in Paris and when?
I was 86, so the winter of 86.
So
by the way,
26
Paris
years
is
old.
pretty cold in the winter. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's cold,
I
but
had no
it's still,
idea.
especially back then, it was a magical city.
No, it was great. I'm just saying, going there, I wasn't prepared for the weather. I had no idea by November it was going to be really freaking cold. Yeah. But it was a great experience. I worked with Jean-Pierre Plouet, who's now the head of Citroën PSA. Him and he was a young designer there, and we hung out on weekends. We went down to the Schlumpf Museum and Terry Metros. And so a lot of those guys now have moved up in the industry as well. So knowing them.
And the Schlumpf collection now resides mainly out here.
I know they closed it down. I don't know where it ended up.
It was what's his name? It's up in Oxnard.
Chandler.
It's in the old Chandler building.
Oh, it's the old Chandler.
That's where most of the Schlumpf collection was.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah,
all the Bugatti Royales.
It's followed you.
Yeah, there you go. I'll have to get up there then. I didn't know.
So how long were you living in France?
So I was at Renault for about 3.5 months. I went there in early September. I came back just before Christmas.
Okay, so this brings up two very important things. This is two kids from New York talking.
Yeah.
So there you are. Are you a single man in France?
Yeah. I had a girlfriend from Art Center back here, yeah.
Oh, so you went over as a single man, stayed a single man.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And did you get any cool cars when you were over there?
No, I didn't. I didn't have a car, actually. I used to, Francois Venet, who was the head of design for Renault, he lived near where I was staying in this Renault public housing apartment where the guys who worked in the engine factory would stay. And so he would pick me up every morning. And so it was a great experience because I get to drive with him, and I'd hear all the inside stories about Renault and Le Mans and all those guys and what they were doing. And it of course, at the time you don't realize like this is amazing because he's just driving you to work and you get to talk to him and
It's
you're young.
highly unusual.
Yeah. It was cool. He was a neat guy.
The only thing we have in common about our European experiences working for large car companies is we both lived in the housing that they offer.
Oh, I didn't know you. Okay.
Yeah. So now, I did not design French cars. I built German cars. So I was a grunt in the factory.
For Audi or BMW?
No, for BMW in Munich.
Wow, okay.
And I lived in there was a
the
Wohnheim
employee housing. Yeah.
I had some crazy roommates. I don't know if you had the crazy roommates.
I luckily had my own room, but it was a crazy building.
You know what? This discussion's over. I've decided I do not like you any longer. Okay, so you come back from France. What do we do?
I had 2 more terms at Art Center. I finished up Art Center, and my goal had always been to work for one of the big 3, specifically Ford.
So Paris, France did not change that. You didn't think, well, maybe what about going to Germany or what about going
No,
to
I think as an American kid, I always wanted to work for one of the big 3, and I thought, right or wrong, I thought, well, being in Detroit, I will learn everything about the car industry from sort of ground up, how the whole process works. So I went through Art Center. I graduated with honors. I got 2 offers.
Any more internships besides?
No, just those 2.
Just 2. Okay.
So I did the 2, and I got out in about a little over 3 years.
Was there any nostalgia for New York? Like that was a problem for me.
Oh, yeah.
I've lived all over the world, but there's always a
honestly, there still is. I miss it. I mean, I love it here. I get out of the airport at John Wayne. I'm like, yeah, you can't beat this, but there's something about New York. There's an energy and an honesty, and there's just something about the people that I
Would you ever go back?
I would. I mean, I think it's with my kids now, and they're in school. It's a little hard.
When I become very rich and very famous, I
think that goes for both of us.
Buy a place out there. Yeah. Actually, I do look online at listings. 2 days ago, I found this 3-story place on the Upper West Side,
like a brownstone.
Brownstone. It was actually it's in a 6-story building.
Yeah.
But it was 3 different stories, and it's like wood floor, exposed brick, and it wasn't like crazy money.
Yeah.
And I was like, how can I make this work? Anyway,
well, it's funny you say that because
we should split that.
Yeah, that could work. 6 months a year. Yeah.
We'll figure out this deal.
Yeah. How we'll put this together.
We'll figure out how to put it. Yeah. It's the maintenance is the killer on this one.
Yeah.
The maintenance you could buy a nice airplane for the maintenance of this thing. Anyway, so where do you go?
So I got an offer out of school from Chrysler. And ironically enough, I got an offer from Mazda. So the Mazda offer was to go to Japan and work in the Hiroshima studio in Japan. And at the time, Chrysler was still K-car and everything, but they were moving and they had some cool stuff. They had a good marketing pitch to get me there.
This is mid-'80s.
This is 87.
So this is just before all the cool stuff is happening.
I got there just at the right time.
Yeah, the concept cars just started to change.
The Viper, the Portofino, the Slingshot, all of that cool stuff that Chrysler did. I got in just as they were starting it.
Did you work with Bob Boniface over there?
No, Bob came after I left.
He's a little bit younger than you. Yeah. So what did you work on? What was the first thing you did there?
One of the first projects I did was probably like an LH proposal. But then early on, I was probably there 3 or 4 months, and then Bob Lutz came in
for
with
the avoidance of doubt, so people understand the LH proposal.
LH was the front, the cab forward designs that kind of brought them out of the K car era and kind of ushered them into the cab forward. Yeah, it was, like I said, it was an amazing time. And then about 3 or 4 months in, Bob Lutz, not Bob Lutz, but Neil Walling, who was my boss, my director, and then Tom Gale, who was the head of design, they came to my desk and said, hey, we've got a project for you. Would you be interested in, of course I was interested in it. And it was basically a rebirth of the Cobra. course, it wasn't the Viper at the time. It was a rebirth of the Cobra. And I was like, wow, this sounds amazing.
So you were the one that sketched the Viper?
Well, I started sketching on it, and then they brought a couple other guys in. It turned out one of them was my roommate. And so the three, myself and two other roommates, were actually the three youngest guys there. And so they put us in charge of the project and let us sketch on it.
I'm going to make you pause here for a minute because we need to take stock. I started this out, and most people know you as the guy who's designed three Miatas.
Yeah.
And now I'm hearing about the Viper. Be honest. A designer over his entire career, how many iconic cars the average designer gets to work on? Be honest.
Maybe one?
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe one.
That's a huge maybe.
Yeah.
I'm counting 4.
4 cars, yeah. Ironically, none of them had roofs. That's the irony of it all.
For a kid from New York, especially.
Yeah. All convertibles. But,
what were you driving at this point?
I bought my brother's Scirocco.
So you and Ralph both had Scirocco's.
I didn't know that.
When you first started at Chrysler.
Okay,
probably you guys were in the parking lot at the same time.
Yeah, we were stuck in the back.
Because there's another parking lot.
Yeah, if you didn't own a Chrysler product, you were at the far end of Nowheresville. It was just way the hell out there.
I think GM does that too.
Yeah.
At the tech center.
It was the incentive for you to buy a Chrysler.
Yeah.
But, candidly, it was nothing they made that I wanted to drive, except
in
maybe a
87?
GLH. I think a GLH was available.
But that was just...
Yeah.
I don't get it with those things.
Yeah. So I kept that the whole time I was a Chrysler.
And how long were you working on the Viper project?
Viper was we did the show car for Detroit, and I think we started in June. So it's 6 months, 7 months. And what's the French guy's name who was at Chrysler?
Oh, Castan.
Francois. So I interacted with them a little bit.
Yeah.
But as far as the engine, I don't think we even knew what was going in there until we were.
What's fascinating about Francois Castan, I'm probably butchering his last name. Most people don't think about the work he did because he was at AMC for so long.
Yeah, he was at AMC. Yeah.
But all of the innovation came from Francois Castan, not the Chrysler people, but the ex-AMC people.
He was a really good guy. I mean, from what I remember, he was very progressive. At the time we were doing everything off a K-car platform, and he was help spearheading the whole LH and the cab forward.
Did you have much interaction with the engineering folks like that?
Yeah, the way the studio was set up, we sat next to a bunch of, we called them techers. And they were the engineers, and that was the tech team. So we interacted with them.
Was that unusual for you guys to be sitting next to the techers?
I don't know. It was my first job, so I assume that's the way they always were.
From what I've learned from talking to folks like you, that is unusual.
Yeah.
And I do remember Bob talks about one of his books that they deliberately put groups together. Actually, no, you know who it was? Iacocca. It was in his book that he talked about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they worked, they were 5 feet from me. They had a whole cubicle of guys, and I sat across from them. And each studio was set up to have kind of almost self-contained. You had modelers, designers, and tech guys. And so there were I think there were 6 studios. And we were the advanced.
You don't have that
studio.
Here it's, you have the
modelers.
It's
a smaller group.
Yeah.
There we had 200 designers maybe, so.
So I'm gathering at this point, if you're working on the Viper, because most, again, for the audience, when people start at a car company like that, what are they really working on?
Usually they're working on velocity packages and.
Yeah, they call it hubcap duty.
Yeah.
And you got to work on a Viper.
It was the advanced studio, so I was very lucky. We had the advanced studio and the international studio, because at the time we also were doing Lamborghinis.
Now, hold on a minute. You worked on some Lamborghini stuff too?
I did when I was at Chrysler. Yeah.
What Lamborghinis?
We did. I'm trying to remember what it was going to be called. I guess it was the Diablo. So we did a proposal. I did a proposal that really looked a lot like the Countach, a modern version of that. And funny story, I found out later on that apparently the design was really well liked by the Chrysler executives, but they had a contract with, I want to say, not Gandini. Who was the big guy designing cars at the time?
Pininfarina.
No, it was an individual. I guess he did the Diablo. He ended up doing the Diablo.
Gigaro?
No, I'm trying to remember what it was. So it was the Italian guy. But anyway, he was contract. No, it was a one guy. It was like a gun. Maybe it was Gandini. I don't know. But maybe at the end of his career. And so the Diablo, and there was another car that was very similar to that.
The Murcielago.
Yeah. Maybe that was it. And so that was like from a political standpoint, that was going to be the design they picked. So when they did the big dome, display and design.
Well, you worked on either Diablo or Murcielago because
it was way back. I think it was Diablo. It was. I'm trying to remember what the actual.
And how old were you when you were working on that?
I was probably like 35. No, I take that back. No, I was 28 because I was still at Chrysler. Yeah.
Most of us have posters of Lamborghinis on our wall.
Yeah. And that was kind of it. I remember like the original Countach, and so I was inspired by that when I did this. So I did a full-size model, full-size clay. They painted it, and because of the politics involved, and they were afraid they were going to pick it, and then the upper management wanted the one from the Italian guy, they didn't show my car at the presentation. And I only found out about it late. I was really upset as a young designer. I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why didn't you show my car?
And this was done in Auburn Hills.
We were
Highland Park.
In Highland Park. This was still Highland Park. So they didn't end up showing, and he rolled in. They shipped a car in from Italy that he had designed, and they brought that. That was the one with the drop-down window. You remember that? And I think it was the Diablo.
Yeah.
And that was where they went, and then mine just,
that was a Diablo.
Down the basement, yeah. Yeah.
So let's clarify here. You are working in an advanced studio on an unusual project when everybody else has to work on hubcap duty.
Dynasties, New Yorkers.
Yeah. I mean, the crap that Lee...
Aries K.
Yeah, the stuff that Lee Iacocca loved, not Bob Lutz.
Yeah.
Was there ever a thought in your mind like, maybe I should have went to Japan? Maybe I should have done the Mazda thing?
No, not at all. It was a great experience. It was everything I expected it to be.
How many years in total you were at Chrysler?
I was there 3 years, and then I did the rotation. Every young designer rotated out to the Pacifica studio in California. And so I rotated out there. But before that, this was 90 or 89, I was working at Chrysler, and I'd heard about this new sports car that was coming out from Mazda. And myself and two other designers flew to Chicago for the day just to see the launch of the MX-5 Miata.
In 89?
Yeah, in 89. This was February of 89, the Chicago Auto Show. And so I flew out for that, and I was like, just taken by the car.
Before it's out, Chrysler flew you out for a PR thing?
No, we went on our own. It was three of us. We're like, we got to go see this.
You were that interested?
Yeah, I was in the market for a new car at the time. The Scirocco was kind of getting old, and I needed something new, and I was looking at something, that 200 SX. I wanted a rear drive car. And so I was looking at that, and then all of a sudden I'd heard rumors about this sports car Mazda was bringing out. I think there was some pictures of it leaked or something. And so we went to Chicago to see the car, and I remember seeing it, and they had the Club Sport there, that yellow one, and I was like, that's it, I got to have one of these. So as soon as I got back to Michigan, I put a deposit down on the car in like probably March. They didn't even know what colors it was coming in. I wanted the yellow one. And I put a deposit down on it, and the car came in, and I probably got the third or fourth Miata in Michigan. Came in on I picked it up July 3rd, 89. And I remember bringing it into the design studio, and man, did I get a lot of crap. My God. Because you got to remember, at the time, the Chrysler LeBaron was the best-selling convertible in America. With the diamond tuck interior and everything, and the cowl shake and all that fun stuff.
Lee Iacocca special.
Yeah, and again, it Chrysler survived on that. So, but this car was just, it was simple and basic and lightweight, and I got crap because it just seemed cheap, and the door panels were made of cardboard, and it's so simple. And I'm like, guys, you got to drive this thing. You don't understand it. It's not like the leather seats and all that. You got to drive it. So I had that car when I worked at Chrysler in Michigan, and then they transferred me out to Pacifica, which was perfect. So I came out to Pacifica. They shipped all my belongings, my motorcycle, and my Miata. And so I lived in California for, the rotation was 6 months.
And that was San Diego, that
studio. Was down in Carlsbad,
Which is now Mercedes' studio.
Yes, correct, yeah.
And you must think this was like you're back in California. Band's back together.
Yeah, it was
Why
great.
Go back to Michigan?
No, it was great. And to tie the whole thing together, my roommate at the time in Michigan, Craig Durfee, he had done his rotation out there, and then he got an offer he came in when he came at Pacifica. He ended up interviewing with Mazda, so he got a job with Mazda. So he had left Chrysler, and what was happening is a lot of the guys would leave Michigan and go to Pacifica, and then like, I'm not going back to Michigan, so they would get jobs out here. So when I went out to Pacifica, you know, I would spend time with Craig because we'd known each other.
And no one at Chrysler HR put two and two together. Like, we send them out there, they don't come back.
I think they did, but I think this was just part of a system, and it's such a big ocean liner. It's hard to kind of move things quick. So this was just the process they had. And Craig said to me, he goes, hey, you know what? They're looking for, we're looking for a designer at Mazda. Would you be interested? So I was like, sure. So I went up and I interviewed with Tom Matano, who was the father of the Miata. And, I like to think my portfolio was good, and I'd worked on some good projects with Craig and the Viper and everything. But then when he heard I owned a Miata and I worked for Chrysler, I think that was
seal the deal.
That was the seal of the deal. Yeah. I had gotten the offer from Tom. In fact, he had Craig show me around the studio, so I'd seen everything here, but there was no official paperwork, and so I didn't want to quit Chrysler without knowing I guaranteed had a job.
Absolutely.
So I waited, and I remember I called HR here and I said, they're going to send me back, and they're going to ship all my stuff back, and you're going to have to ship everything back to California. So you guys if you can get this document to me, I can sign it, and we go from there. And they didn't. And literally, I was back in Michigan for a week. They shipped my car, my motorcycle, all my belongings back to Michigan, and I was there a week. And I think the week I got back, that Friday, I got the letter from Mazda.
Now you're in Michigan. You have to turn back around. Where are you at personally? You're a married man. What's going on?
No, I met my wife. She was an intern at Chrysler from the University of Cincinnati. She was doing industrial design, so they did an internship program with UC, Chrysler did, and so they would rotate people in. So I met her there, and then she came out to Pacifica and did an internship at Pacifica with me, and then when I got the job with Mazda, she finished up at UC, graduated from UC, and then she moved out to California. I think it was like 92 or something.
And then you become an adult and get married. Instead of a word from our sponsors, a brief interruption. As you can imagine, all of us here are incredibly excited about the return of Inside the MotoMan Studio. So much so, we'd like to bring you more guests more frequently, and in the future, make some of these live town hall events. So to that end, we'd like to ask you a favor. Can you help us get the word out? There are two really easy ways to do this. First and foremost, can you share the show, Inside the MotoMan Studio, on your favorite social platforms? That includes Reddit. I would argue Reddit is even more important than the usual suspects. And then second, this is now a podcast. So go to your favorite podcast directory and subscribe, rate, and review Inside the MotoMan Studio. However you choose to help us, we'd be greatly appreciative. And now, back to this incredible story. So you're at this point early 30s when you first started at Mazda.
Yeah.
And what was the first project you worked on here?
God, it goes back a lot. It was a couple cars, Japanese market cars we were involved in. At the time I got there, they were just launching the third gen, the FDRX7.
Yeah, that one
you got hidden. Yeah,
the one you got hidden downstairs. I want to take that from you.
We've got a few downstairs. Yeah, that
they've seen it. There's been an episode of that white one.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
exactly.
I love that car.
I think we have 3 white.
28,000 miles, original miles on that car.
And then I think it was 96 and 97, Tom came to me and said, hey, I want you to work on the next gen MX-5. So, which was, again, an amazing project to work on, having owned this one. And, there was a connection, and he felt I understood what the car was about. And he heard my story about buying one with Chrysler. And so it seemed like a natural connection. The challenge for me was I felt a little bit like the stepfather raising the kid, because the 2 people responsible for the car, 3, was Tom, Mark Jordan, and Wu Wong Chin, who designed the first gen car, and they weren't part of the design of the second gen car.
Why was that?
Just because Tom gave me the project and wanted me to work on it, and he thought I'd bring something different to it. And they gave me great guidance, but I think there was still that element of don't screw it up, man.
This was mid-90s.
96, 97.
So, okay, we've discussed this many times. When we go on these trips, he and I, we talk about everything. I got to think that even back then, Mazda figured out that they got lightning in a bottle. Even back then.
Yeah, I think Tom felt he had a pretty good designer on his hand, yeah.
No, listen to you, man.
Yeah, no, I think you did, though.
You think you're like a pink unicorn walking on rainbows at this point.
I've been pretty lucky.
You have been unusually lucky. Like, at this point, I think I need to give you a couple bucks and go buy me a lottery ticket.
There you go.
That's what's going to happen.
I'll buy myself one, too.
Yeah. But what I mean is Mazda had lightning in a bottle with this car.
Oh, absolutely.
I think even at that point they realized this is...
Absolutely, yeah.
And I know back then I realized that this was kind of in the pantheon of Corvettes and 911s and Range Rovers in terms of design, of how important it is to the car company. Was that daunting at all at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it was that as well as just knowing the guys who worked and had been part of the first one, or the whole birth of the car, were in the same studio with me. And yeah, there was, from my standpoint, and I think from their standpoint, we didn't want to screw it up. I mean, it was a challenging, even the beginning, just conceptually, what was the car going to be and how was it going to change and what part of it do we want to keep and what part needed to be different. And that was a big challenge. I mean, one of the big driving forces, we had to get rid of the pop-up headlights. And so that was what was driving a lot of the front end of the car.
Now, why?
Well, there was a lot of one. It was extra weight ahead of the front wheels, and also there was regulations for pedestrian impact and things like that. So
it was a technical challenge.
Yeah, it was a technical. There was regulations. I don't know if they were phasing, if DOT was phasing it out or NHTSA, whoever, but there was basically this move to get away from pop-up headlights. And I do remember discussing with engineers. They felt that the pop-up headlights had too much weight. Everything with us, with Mazda, is about weight. And so having this extra weight out ahead, up high above the wheels was, from a purely technical standpoint, wasn't desirable. So,
was there a feeling with Tom that this is a huge risk, putting this early 30s kid on something, when really this is the brain trust and we should put the people who invented it back on it?
Well, as far as the project goes, we weren't alone. I mean, we did our proposal. Our European studio in Frankfurt did their proposal, and the studio in Hiroshima did their proposal. So there were 3 very unique proposals, actually. And so as far as entrusting me, it wasn't like I was the only one doing it. There were 3 proposals that we would do a bake-off in Japan, and the senior management would pick the direction. So in that sense, that was a little bit of the safety net. It wasn't just one guy doing the car, and it was all in our hands.
Yet it was your design that was picked.
Yet at the end of the day, it was my direction that was picked, and then followed that through here, and then went to Japan for a few months.
When you get something picked, forget about whether it's a Miata or a Viper. If you get something picked, especially at a company where you are effectively a way station, being here in California, what happens to that design? Does it go to a group in Japan to make it a reality, or do you go with the car and work on it? Yeah,
so we work on it here to a certain level, probably 80%. 70% feasibility, and then it goes to Japan, because then you need the stamping engineers involved, and then I went to Japan for about 3.5 months and worked on it there in Japan. And at the time I had a chief designer there, Yoichi Sato, who was also worked on the RX-7 with the guys here. So he had he was a very talented guy.
Did the FD design come from here? The sketch came from this studio?
Yeah.
So this was a very successful studio.
Yeah, we were peaking here. We had done that design. We did the MX-6 not too long after that, or just before.
The MX-6 was
MX-6.
gorgeous.
Yeah. So
beautiful car.
We were really doing a lot of great stuff. Yeah,
93,
and that came out just like right after I got. It was already designed.
Yeah.
By the time I got here, but
so this studio has a distinction of being one of the older studios, the physical building.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Here in Southern California. How long has it been here?
86 it opened up.
Okay, so as you move from the 80s and then into the 90s and then to the basically turn of the century, how much oversight do you have to deal with Ford?
There was a period there where Ford got heavily involved. I can't remember exactly what year, probably 90s, I think just around when the Miata, probably 97, they came in and they took over. They took 33% controlling interest, and Japanese business law, they have, at that point, 33%, they have controlling interest, so they brought Ford executives in to run things. So it was an interesting time. I mean, I think there was a lot of positives to it, certainly from a financial standpoint.
Give me 3 positives.
Well, I think they gave us a lot of resources from a financial standpoint. I think from a business side, it made sense. We weren't struggling for finances. We had a lot of money available to us to do stuff. We were able to amortize the cost of a car within Mazda and Ford, like the Probe and the MX-6. Mazda 3, we built a Volvo off of it, and I think the Ford Focus or Escort at the time. And the Mazda 3, the first Mazda 3. There was some negatives to it as well.
Like what?
A lot of different management structure. So like every year or so, there'd be a new guy heading up R&D in Japan because they were cycling guys through their system, I guess, to get the international experience. So we had a lot of different guys in charge of R&D, which then encompassed design and engineering in Japan.
So did it give you opportunities to work on projects you otherwise couldn't have?
I think in the big scheme of things, we probably got into projects we wouldn't have got into just from a financial standpoint. As far as directly how it impacted me, I don't think it impacted me as far as projects go, other than a couple programs that we really had to take cost out of to make them viable from a Ford perspective.
So for the avoidance of doubt, did you experience Mazda both pre and post Ford?
Yeah.
You did. So
yeah.
What was the difference? Like when you first got here, you're 100% Mazda.
I think we just had a little clearer focus as to what we were. I think when Ford came in, they had their agenda, what they were trying to do. And to be fair, I'm not clear exactly what that was, but I know that they had a big influence over the team in Japan on how they do business. And, I think profitability is high. Not that it isn't for every car company, but sometimes you can err on the side of all we want to do is make money. And if we could take money out of the car, we'll do that. And I'd be maybe mixing these up, but there was like 4 different brands, and one was specifically like a Mazda Ford brand. AutoZam were the little A-class cars. And then Unos, Ifini, and then you had Mazda. So
there was a lot going on in the late 90s.
Yeah, there were a lot of cars out there in mid-90s.
So at what point did they start introducing some financial discipline to Mazda?
I think that's when Ford came in. I think that was the same thing happened was we needed to consolidate. We just had too many products, different badges on different cars, and it was just, I think it got too big. We kind of, in a sense, got too big for our britches. We thought we were going to be this like world beater as far as having a million different products and different segments, and then I think we took a hit for that, and that's when I think Ford came in to kind of help us out. And that's like I said, the positive was they were able to sort of right the ship in that respect. As far as their heavy influence, it started to sort of die down a little bit early 2000s.
Yeah.
I think it was 2005 or 6 where they basically, we bought them back, and we bought Mazda back, and we took sole ownership.
It was highest as 39% was the highest, and then once Alan came in, that's when he was like, we're done with this.
Yeah, I think so. And eventually they got out of it, and then all the executives became Mazda, Japanese employees from the standpoint of not coming from the Ford tree, if you will, and then it kind of took off from there. And I think then we were really clearly pretty focused on
what was the first car that was all Mazda after Ford?
Probably the 3rd gen Mazda 3 and Mazda 6.
At this point, let's switch gears a little bit, and now you're getting older. Got a little bit more money in your pocket. We racing cars? We getting classic cars?
Yeah, at that point, at that point, I was really getting into racing. Our senior VP at the time, Robert Davis, and
great guy.
Yeah,
Can shoe.
He's just good at everything he does. Yeah, he's just super smart guy. Passionate, really understood what Mazda was all about. I said I always wanted to race cars. He said, all right, well, we've got a couple Miatas. You should take them out and go get your license. And that's pretty much how it started. I did a super school up at Willow Springs, and I borrowed a couple MX-5. At the time, they were SCCA cars, so they were SSBs, like showroom stock B. And myself and 2 other designers went up and took the 2-day super school, and we got our SCCA license, and we weren't racing. And so that was in 2005.
Like all car companies loan their designers cars.
No, it really is.
That's a common thing.
It's pretty special. Mazda's pretty special like that. We had a lot of opportunities to live what the brand's all about.
I think this is probably, of all the charmed existences you've had in your life, let's get into the most charmed existence, in that you weren't just racing your own spec Miata.
No, I started with the spec Miata, and then I got to do some races at Thunder Hill in RX-8s, and that was a great experience. And I think just doing that, and I was pretty successful. I won the SCCA championship my second year out, and eventually we started collecting some historic race cars.
Mazda historic race cars.
And this again is down to Robert and Kelvin Hiraishi. He's our director of engineering. There were a lot of historic race cars that were in Japan that nothing was happening with. They were just sitting there. And Robert and Kelvin were over there on a business trip and saw them and said, what would it take for us to get those cars? They came up with a plan, and they ended up buying the cars, and they shipped them here. And they were all pretty rough when we got them. But between our department in design with the aesthetics and repainting them and restoring them, and Robert and some of the engineering guys getting involved in the engines and everything, we basically restored 3 cars.
And for the avoidance of doubt, these are not spec Miatas or RX-7s.
No, these were the car that finished at Le Mans, I think it was 7th or 8th, the year we won, and a 7767 we also ran the year before. And we have a RX-7 GTO that won a championship in the IMSA series here in the States. And we have a 792 IMSA GTP car, which also ran the IMSA series here. So we had 4 really super competitive prototype cars and silhouette cars that we restored, and then I was given the opportunity to actually race one for a couple of years, along with Robert and at the time the director of PR and a couple other guys within the company. So it was a great honor bestowed on me by the head of motorsports at the time, John Doonan, and I got to race the 767 for 2 years at Coda and Mazda Raceway. And
this is, I think, the most telling about why you guys are different. Not the design.
I would agree.
It's not
No,
this thing.
agree, yeah.
It's not like the fact that you can do this in design. It's the fact that the guy who heads up PR, that was Jeremy, the guy who heads up R&D, and now I think business, Robert,
yeah.
and then now the design director of North America, are racing real race cars.
Yeah.
That says everything you know about scrappy old Mazda.
I think so. I mean, we really live what the brand's about. I mean, that's the beauty
The
of this
zoom, not the feel alive.
The zoom. Yeah. I mean, we are, in essence, we are the zoom company. We're about the passion. We put it into every one of our products. I mean, we really are like, we live the brand. I mean, I don't know what it's like at other car companies, but I can't imagine that other designers get to do what I've been able to do.
I know I haven't built
other
SEMA show
executives,
cars for other car companies.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you did, yeah.
Yeah. That's how you and I really came together.
Yeah.
That was in 12 we did that.
I think so, yeah. We had 4
fun.
Cars that year, I think. That was quite an undertaking, yeah.
And can you please tell the audience that I wasn't just sitting around filming things. I really did.
He was bossing us around. No, you were a big part of it. You were helping out with the MX-5 we did.
I painted the cars.
Yeah, we did CX-5 concepts for SEMA. So, yeah, you were involved in the whole process with us.
Okay, so where do you go from here? I mean, you've delivered 3 Miatas at this point.
Keep moving forward. We're always doing some new stuff.
No, forget about the we. You.
Oh, me.
We're not doing the we.
Okay.
This is about Ken Saward. Yeah, and some Mazda. But
well, recently I finally got to the point I've got the racing thing established. I've got a car. I've got a new motor in it. I'm good. And then I'm jonesing for like a classic car. So
but you already have one.
Yeah, well, I haven't got to that. But yeah, I put a list together probably 3 years ago of like the 10 cars I want to own in my lifetime. One of them was a 911 Turbo, which I bought in 15. And I had that for 2 years, a year and a half, and then somebody made me an offer on it I couldn't refuse. I hadn't planned on selling it, but
It was a 996.
It was a 996, yeah. Beautiful car, amazing technology. Love the car, miss it, but somebody made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I got a list of cars, my bucket list cars. I'm like, okay, well, I'll check that off and I'll go to the next one. The next one on my list was I want a C2 Corvette. So I had a very specific Corvette that I was looking for. I wanted a car that was loaded. I wanted a NASA blue. I wanted it with knockoff wheels. And I was really lucky to find one, and I bought it from a gentleman in Florida. The car had 40,000 miles on it.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a nice car. It's a really well.
For those that are watching, they can look at my Instagram about a year ago, because that's when I had the E63S wagon.
Yeah, we were up at
Yeah.
Yeah.
You abused badly, and I got called to the principal's office for that drag racing
Not
day.
hard to do in that car. My God.
So they can see pictures of that car in my studio, along with Jeremy.
Yeah, Jeremy's E-Type.
E-Type, yes. So you got 2 off the list. Now, what are the other 8?
They all get a little bit more expensive.
Okay.
So a Ford GT.
05?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I've got that either white with blue stripe or a black one.
Okay.
With a silver stripe. So I've got very specific.
I like the black one.
Yeah. 928 GTS.
Oh, yeah. I've been looking for a 928 for a while now.
So that's on the list. I'd love to have the same Cadillac we had growing up, but
does it have to be a GTS, or would you do a GT?
I'm sorry. Yeah, GTS. Yeah, with the big fenders.
It's got to be the GTS. Okay, yeah. Of course.
And again, that's
most expensive one.
Yeah, and again, that one's pricing. It's getting crazy.
Yeah, they're 100, 120.
Yeah,
at this point.
They're going up. I mean, they were probably 75 when I started looking at them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess any 928. I mean, I'll target that as like the ideal case, but and then I'd love a 62 Cadillac Eldorado.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and we had a 62
they did the
coupe.
buckets in there with a small console.
Yeah,
I
it
love
was
that
beautiful.
car.
It was beautiful.
Convertible?
Yeah, convertible. Yeah. Couple crazy cars. Obviously, to me, a Superbird was just the epitome of just insane extravagance.
You are from New York.
Yeah. There was something about it. It's not a pretty car, but it's just something that they did, and I think it was pretty impressive. A 79 or 80 Firebird Trans Am, and that was mainly because when I was
like a late Bandit.
Yeah, late Bandit. Yeah, with the square headlights. Yeah.
God, you really are from New York, man.
Yeah. That was the car, man. All the guys getting all the hot girls. They always they had Trans Ams. They were driving up and down Northern Boulevard, going to Carvel.
Absolutely, Carvel, man. Of course, Carvel.
That was a hot car, man. If you had that, boy, you were in.
Or the Golden Eagle, the Jeep. Because it was kind of their screaming chicken, but on a Jeep.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. The Trans Am was the car. Black Trans Am. That was the ticket, man. So that's on the list. The Cadillac's on the list. The 928. I'd love an early turbo, like a 930 turbo. 78, 79.
Yeah, those are big money now.
Yeah, no, they're all, like I said, all of these cars are pretty expensive cars. And then ideally a Viper. I would love to have a Viper at some point.
So you've never owned a Viper in all your years?
No, I didn't. I drove one. Actually, I was close. Before I got the Corvette, I actually was looking at Vipers. And I wanted specifically a 92 or 93. 92 are pretty rare.
But wasn't 93 the GTS? You could get the...
No, I think GTS came in 94, 95. Yeah. It was like... Because I remember we worked on the GTS when I was there. The guy who worked on it was an older gentleman, designed the GTS, and that car looks great too. But I guess my connection is really with the original Vipers. So.
Now, as we're talking about classic cars, there is a significance to the car sitting behind me.
This is a car that I bought in '89 when I lived in Michigan.
So this is first owner, original owner, only owner is you.
70,000 miles, yes.
70,000 miles? I didn't know it was that low.
I think it still has the Autobahn Motors sticker on the windshield from Bloomfield Hills. Yeah, so that's where I bought the car.
So let's switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
Where does Mazda go at this point? Mazda's an unusual case, as we talked about, not just because they let designers like you drive $2 million race cars, but they're an independent small car company. Where does it go?
You know, it doesn't cost more to design an ugly car than it does to design a good-looking car. And in our case, it doesn't necessarily cost more to design a nice, high-level premium product than it does to design a base entry-level commodity
But don't you
product.
get beat up a little bit by, say, the packaging people or the engineering folks?
Of course, yeah. But that goes for anything, whether you're building an entry-level subcompact or you're building a luxury car.
You seem to have more success, though, at winning those battles. Like, for example, the new Mazda 3. Where you've got the quarter panel in the back.
Yeah, it's one smooth
piece.
surface. Yeah.
I'm not an engineer, but I know that is incredibly hard to do. It was so hard to do, I had to have you come on and explain it in that episode. How did you win that battle?
We're this little company, the little engine that could. So there's that sort of like that fighting spirit of everybody really pushing above their weight or fighting above their weight, if you will. And I think that's why we're able to do it. The engineers are as committed to doing great stuff as we are to doing beautiful-looking cars. And that all goes hand in hand. The powertrain guys are as committed to building great, lightweight, powerful engines that get good fuel economy as we are to do beautiful cars like a Mazda 3.
Okay, I'll switch gears. Back into Ken. You have had an unusually amazing run.
I've been very blessed, yeah.
An incredible career.
Yeah.
Well, I've known you long enough to know you're not just blessed, you are a very talented designer.
Yeah, thank you.
I've seen your work, and not just driving it, I've actually helped you work on your work. And I'm grateful, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
So what I want to understand is if you're talking to this kid growing up in Queens that is 15 years old and his uncle and his dad, let's say that they just bought a 62 Cadillac together. What are the three things, three aspects, it could be three people, it could be three lucky breaks that transform you from the kid that went to community college in Queens to being the design director of North America of Mazda with a C2 in his garage and racing $2 million race cars?
It's probably more than three things, but if you really want to narrow it down, I think, like I always had this vision, I never had a doubt that's what I was going to do. And I think in life, anything is like that. If you don't doubt your success, you're going to be successful. If you believe, not in an arrogant way, but if you just believe really strongly that something's going to come to fruition, you need to work at it. I had no idea my career was going to be as amazing as it has been, but I had no doubt that I was going to design cars. And again, it took a lot of hard work. I think we talked earlier about Art Center. My parents put me through school, and I knew that my goal was to get out and get a really good job because it was a lot of money to go there, and I wanted to sort of pay my parents back in that respect. And I treated college like work. I mean, I didn't party, didn't go out to parties on a Saturday.
Was that a work ethic that was instilled in you by just looking at what your parents did, or did they sit you down and say, we expect you to bust your ass?
No, they never did. I think it was just watching my mom and dad and how they lived their life, and my dad worked hard and my mom worked hard, and yeah, I mean, and my oldest brother was working early from an early age making money, and my middle brother worked. I think it was just a family thing. I mean, we just had a good work ethic. I mean,
Saward work ethic.
Yeah, we didn't grow up on a farm where we were doing work from sun up to sundown. But
so, what are two other things?
Having some real great mentors in your life that you could look up to. I think when I started, it was sort of me determined to do this to get there. But then I had some great people I worked with at Chrysler. My roommate was an inspiration. Craig was a super talented designer, and so he was a lot of inspiration and drove me with that Chrysler. And then coming to work here at Mazda with Tom, that was big. Tom was a super positive influence on me as far as his belief in me, and then just the way he went about designing things. And he didn't always follow this straight path to get to where he needed to go. He realized there was going to be detours along the way, but like I said, he never gave up, and he always pushed. And on this product, there's no doubt that a lot of the reason this vehicle exists today is because of Tom pushing and pushing and pushing. And then, even within my racing career, people like Robert Davis, who nothing's impossible with him. I mean, he has you do things that you didn't think you could even do. And 25 hours at Thunder Hill racing cars there in the middle of the night in the pouring rain. He has complete faith and confidence that you can do it, and that belief. Sometimes he has more belief in you than you do, and I think that was sometimes really helpful. So we did Thunder Hill a few years in a row, and it rained in the middle of the night, and he'd get in the car at 3 a.m, and rain's pissing down, and he'd go for it. Take care of the car and bring it home in one piece, and total confidence in what you did. He doesn't point the finger and ask you to do stuff if he wouldn't do it himself. He'll lay down on the ground and change the oil in a race car, and he doesn't tell the minions to do stuff. He's willing to do it himself. So
I can attest to that because you and I both had brake fluid on our hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember doing
together.
The brake calipers.
Yes.
As a designer, that's something, the designers really get in the shop and start tearing apart brake calipers.
No, they simply don't. And on that note, thank you for having me.
Hey,
this was
my
incredible.
pleasure sitting and talking with you as always.
I don't like you as much now that I know you did Vipers. But you are an incredible story.
Thank you. It's good spending time with you.
Many thanks for joining us throughout the entirety of this episode. And don't forget, subscribe, rate, and review Inside the MotoMan Studio on your favorite podcast directory. And while you're sharing, how about on your socials as well as on Reddit? Until our next incredible guest, be später.